there, welcome to the channel. Today we're talking about inductions, and I have put together my top 5 tips for inductions that I'm going to share with you today. The first one, my number 1 tip, is actually the same tip that you'll probably see in my early labor video, and that is that rest is key. So inductions are usually much longer than labors that start on their own. Pacing yourself and keeping your rest it's beyond critical for a successful induction. That doesn't mean that it's easy. It can be really hard to rest in an induction. So inductions usually have a time where you check into the hospital and you are waiting for things to happen. You're waiting for them to decide how you're going to be induced sometimes. Sometimes you're waiting for them to get started on the medication, the Cytotec or the pitocin or the Foley bulb, whatever method you're being induced by. That usually involves waiting. And then a lot of times, no matter which method you are started with, a lot of times there is a waiting period until your body picks up on and starts doing anything, especially if you start with a Cytotec or a Cervidil, which is like an overnight process usually, which rest is really key. I want you to just think that unless you are having contractions that you are having to work on, I want you to try to be sleeping or resting. This is probably not what you're used to, because this will be like in the middle of the day. You're probably not used to trying to sleep in a hospital bed in the middle of the day. And it might be really hard to be restful as far as sleeping, but at least be in a restful position, be laying down. And this process is so key because you're charging your batteries. So many times I have talked to childbirth ed students who get back to me about how their labor went, and they tell me about their 3-day induction and how long and hard it is. And as a doula myself, I have had clients to go through these 3-day inductions as well. So rest is so important. I can't overstate it. And make sure that you have a good support team that is on board with this rest strategy too, so that everybody is prioritizing that rest. My number 2 tip actually comes into play once your contractions get going. And this is going to be probably a little bit different from what you've heard of about inductions, but I'm trying to spread the word that most people have the ability to get into water during an induction. So sometimes you feel like you have to be stuck in the bed with the induction, because you have monitors and you have continuous monitoring on your belly and your baby, and you have an IV pole as well most of the time when you have pitocin for an induction. And these things added to your body can make you feel like you don't have a lot of options. But really, most of the contraction monitors that are used in hospitals today are waterproof. And so that means that you should have the ability to get into a nice warm shower in labor. And it can be so helpful during an induction. Inductions have the reputation of sometimes being harder than non-induced labor. But what I think is really different is the pace of the contractions, which can make it feel harder. So the labor, your uterus is doing the same thing, whether you're being induced or whether you're going to labor on your own, but that pace can be really challenging. And so I tell everyone who's having an induction, talk to your labor and delivery nurse early in the process and let them know that you would like to get into a shower in labor. It's like a bucket list item for your labor. I really highly recommend it. Now, tip number 3 kind of goes with tip number 1. I talked about how rest is so important in labor. Well, my tip for number 3 is to be like a turtle. The long, slow, steady game is one to think about with the induction. With the induction medication, it's really better to have a long, slow, steady progress of your labor than to try to speed things up to a point where we might cause fetal distress with the baby. So patience is so key with an induction, and just going into it thinking to yourself, this is going to be long, this is going to be slow, I'm going to be like the turtle, slow and steady wins the race. Just setting up your mindset like that can just be so powerful. If you set your expectations that it's going to be a 3-day induction, and also set your family and friends expectations as well. If you are giving them updates, let them know you're being induced and you might not have any news for 3 days because it is a long, slow process. So be ready for that. If things do end up picking up, that's only a positive surprise for you. I want you to think that you're going to be the turtle, slow and steady towards the birth of your baby. Okay, so we are 3 tips into our 5 top tips for inductions, and now is a great time to hit that like button if you have found any of these tips helpful so far. I'd also love for you to be a subscriber to the channel. There's so many great videos here to help you prepare for your labor and birth. Now, tip number 4 is to move your pole around. What does that mean, Alice? So what I mean by that is it kind of goes back to the idea of getting in the water. You will likely be on an IV drip of pitocin. And that means that you'll have a pole with the IV flowing and the pitocin pump running. And I don't want you to think that means you can't move in labor. So I want you to think about moving your pole around. I want you to think about how can you be mobile. Talk to your nurse about how can I change positions and still have this pole. Now, it might be that you're just changing positions very close to the monitors. You might be getting into different positions on the bed if you have an epidural with your induction. But that movement should not be hindered by the fact that you have that pole. It really feels, I know, to a lot of people that if they're induced, they have no options. I just heard this in a comment on one of my videos the other day. But don't fall for that. Move that pole around. You can do it. It's still really possible. This 5th tip might be a little controversial. I've talked to some labor and delivery nurses and doctors that don't love this idea, but it's so beneficial to you. I'm going to share it because I want you to know the real story here. And that is that pitocin can actually be turned down. And there's one particular situation that I've seen many, many times in my life as a doula over the almost 20 years I've been working as a doula that makes so much sense to turn down the pitocin. And that is if you are laboring along and you get to a point where you have decided that you want to get an epidural. So here's the thing. A lot of people go into the induction maybe either not ready for an epidural yet because they're not feeling any pain, or they're not sure if they want one, right? And then if you hit that point where you decide, yeah, I do want one, this is the situation that I'm in. Well, once your brain decides that you want one, it's hard to cope with contractions afterwards. It's almost like you start walking on a treadmill and it's hard to get back to the running speed. So what you can do at this point is talk to your nurse and your doctor or midwife and ask if you can turn that pitocin down some so that your body has less contractions or the contractions are a little bit less intense until the time that you get the epidural. Now, this might slow labor down a little bit, but we're running that slow, steady race like a turtle. And I would rather have a little bit relief until the time that I get the epidural that I want than have to, have that suffering while you're waiting for the epidural. And what's really great about this strategy and knowing it now, knowing it before you go in, is that something you can talk to your doctor and nurse about before the induction even starts. When they ask you, what is your plan for pain management? You can say, I'm not sure. I think I want an epidural. I'm not sure when. But if I get to a point where I want an epidural, can we consider turning that pitocin down so I can have a little bit easier time period between the ask for the epidural and the relief from the epidural? And it's a very valid request and it can make a huge difference in your birth experience. So don't forget this valuable tip. Now, I am going to link another one of our top 5 videos right here that I'm sure you're going to find helpful before your big day. Thanks so much for joining me. If you found this video helpful, share it with your partner so that they are on the same page. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye.